Welcome to our channel. Today, we're going to summarize The Diary of a Young Girl chapters 1 to 25. The Diary of a Young Girl is a collection of personal diary entries written by Anne Frank, a Jewish girl who went into hiding with her family during the Nazi occupation of the Netherlands in World War II. The diary covers a period of over 2 years, from June 1942 until August 1944, when the family was discovered and sent to concentration camps. Chapter 1, June 12, 1942, July 5, 1942. Anne introduces herself and her family and describes their life before going into hiding. She also discusses her feelings about being Jewish and the restrictions that have been placed on Jews in Amsterdam. Anne is excited to start writing in her diary and hopes that it will be a friend to her. Chapter 2, July 6, 1942, July 11, 1942. Anne writes about her 13th birthday and her hopes and dreams for the future. She also describes the annex where her family is hiding and the challenges they face in their cramped living quarters. Chapter 3, July 12, 1942, July 16, 1942. Anne writes about her relationship with her mother and her feelings of loneliness and isolation. She also discusses her budding romance with Peter, the son of another family in hiding with them. Chapter 4, July 17, 1942, July 22, 1942. Anne discusses her religious beliefs and her thoughts on God. She also writes about the news they receive about the war and the fate of other Jews. Chapter 5, July 23, 1942, July 28, 1942. Anne writes about her frustrations with her mother and her relationship with her father. She also describes her interest in Peter and her hopes for their relationship. Chapter 6, July 29, 1942, August 4, 1942. Anne writes about the difficulties of living in hiding, including the lack of fresh air and exercise. She also discusses her feelings about her body and her changing emotions. Chapter 7, August 5, 1942, August 11, 1942. Anne writes about her relationship with Peter and her desire for more privacy. She also discusses her feelings of guilt about being safe while other Jews are suffering. Chapter 8, August 12, 1942, August 17, 1942. Anne writes about her hopes for the future and her desire to become a writer. She also discusses the difficulties of living in close quarters with her family and the other family in hiding with them. Chapter 9, August 18, 1942, August 23, 1942. Anne writes about her thoughts on education and her desire to continue learning while in hiding. She also discusses her feelings of loneliness and her desire for a close friend. Chapter 10, August 24, 1942, August 31, 1942. Anne writes about her experiences with puberty and her growing interest in Peter. She also discusses her feelings of sadness and despair about the war and the fate of the Jews. Chapter 11, September 1, 1942, September 8, 1942. Anne writes about the challenges of living in hiding, including the lack of space and privacy. She also discusses her thoughts on religion and her desire for a deeper connection with God. Chapter 12, September 9, 1942, September 14, 1942. Anne writes about her relationship with her mother and her feelings of frustration and anger. She also discusses her thoughts on death and her fear of being caught. Chapter 13, September 15, 1942, September 22, 1942. Anne writes about her experiences with school and her desire for a better education. She also discusses her feelings about the war and the Nazis, and her hope for a better future. Chapter 14, September 23, 1942, October 5, 1942. Anne writes about the changing seasons and the difficulties of living in hiding during the fall. She also discusses her growing relationship with Peter and her feelings about him. Chapter 15, October 6, 1942, October 18, 1942. Anne writes about her experiences with reading and writing, and her desire to become a journalist. She also discusses her thoughts on the war and her fear of being discovered. Chapter 16, October 19, 1942, November 3, 1942. Anne writes about her relationship with her parents and her feelings of frustration and isolation. She also discusses her thoughts on love and her desire for a deeper connection with Peter. Chapter 17, November 4, 1942, November 19, 1942. Anne writes about the difficulties of living in hiding during the winter, including the lack of warmth and food. She also discusses her thoughts on beauty and her desire to be appreciated for her inner qualities. Chapter 18, November 20, 1942, December 1, 1942. Anne writes about her experiences with Hanukkah and her thoughts on the meaning of the holiday. She also discusses her feelings about the war and her hopes for the future. Chapter 19, December 2, 1942, December 9, 1942. Anne writes about her relationship with Peter and her feelings of love and longing. She also discusses her thoughts on her own personality and her desire to be kinder and more patient. Chapter 20, December 10, 1942, December 17, 1942. Anne writes about the difficulties of living in hiding during the holiday season. She also discusses her thoughts on the war and her desire for peace. Chapter 21, December 18, 1942, January 2, 1943. Anne writes about her experiences with New Year's Eve and her hopes for the coming year. She also discusses her feelings about her family and her desire for a better relationship with them. Chapter 22, January 3, 1943, January 17, 1943. Anne writes about her experiences with school and her desire for a better education. She also discusses her thoughts on God and her desire for a deeper spiritual connection. Chapter 23, January 18, 1943, February 3, 1943. Anne writes about her relationship with her mother and her feelings of frustration and anger. She also discusses her thoughts on love and her desire for a deeper connection with Peter. Chapter 24, February 4, 1943, February 19, 1943. Anne writes about her experiences with reading and writing and her desire to become a writer. She also discusses her feelings about the war and her hope for a better future. Chapter 25, February 20, 1943, March 11, 1943. Anne writes about her relationship with Peter and her feelings of love and longing. She also discusses her thoughts on beauty and her desire to be appreciated for her inner qualities. Thanks for watching. To read the full version of the book, click on the link in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for similar content.